Will these summer movies flop or succeed at the box office? First up is Inside Out 2 coming out later this week. Now, obviously, the first one was absolutely massive and beloved, and this really seems like it's going to be a comeback for Pixar since a lot of people have not cared for the recent movies. We also have reports coming out saying things like Inside Out 2 is now the highest Pixar ticket pre-seller since Toy Story 4, so amount of people have already pre-ordered their tickets, which sounds amazing because Toy Story 4 did make over $1 billion, so everybody in the comments of that post is saying, oh, this is guaranteeing Inside Out 2 is going to make $1 billion. When you go and look at all the movies that have released since Toy Story 4 from Pixar, the number doesn't sound as impressive anymore because there hasn't been that much competition. Pixar's released Onward, Soul, Luca, all pandemic movies, Turning Red, Lightyear, which was an absolute flop, and then Elemental that ended up having a good box office run, but its opening weekend was pretty bad, so I'm sure the pre-ticket sales weren't that good anyways. So while the wording's trying to make this sound better than it is, I still do think this is going to be an absolutely massive film. First one made almost $900 million. I can see the second one having a very similar box office, and this is going to be a huge success. A Quiet Place Day 1 is the next big movie of the summer coming out at the end of June. This one is a prequel to the two Quiet Place movies, which both made an absolute ton. One made $341 million, and the second one made $297 million at the box office on very cheap budgets. Also, a lot of things I really think they're doing right for this movie. I like the cast they have. I like the director they brought in. It's a brisk 1 hour and 40-minute runtime, which I feel like a lot of people underestimate. A lot of people just want to go to the movies for something really quick under 2 hours and get out. Horror movies also tend to just make an absolute ton of money, especially in comparison to their lower budgets. Now, I can't find the official budget of this film, but A Quiet Place Part 2 did cost $61 million, so we can assume it's going to be a similar budget for this film. Going off of that, I'm going to say this is going to be another massive success for the summer. Borderlands movie coming out later this summer is one of the weirdest ones to guess because the cast is absolutely loaded. Like, look at all the names on this poster. We've got Kevin Hart, Bobby Lee, Kate Blanchett, Jamie Lee Curtis, Jack Black, and more big names in this film. The Borderlands video games were very popular a while ago. We haven't had a new Borderlands game in a while, so I feel like this is kind of a weird time to release a movie about it. But I guess we're just in the time of video game adaptations with things like The Last of Us and Fallout being huge successes and the Mario Brothers movie making a ton of money at the box office. But I sadly think this is going to be the movie to put an end to the video game adaptation success for a multitude of reasons. First of all, Borderlands is simply not as popular of any of those games that I just mentioned. Maybe like 10 years ago it would have been. This series has kind of just completely fallen out of pop culture relevancy lately, so I just feel like people aren't going to care if you're not familiar with the games. Why am I going to go see this? Also, I've been seeing this trailer for months. I'm not going to lie, it looks super bad and just bland. I feel like there's nothing in it that's going to make people go and see this, so we don't know what the budget's going to be for this. It's probably ridiculously high. I'm going to say this is a flop. Twisters is one of the most interesting movies of the summer. This could go either way. First Twister movie back in 1996 made a ton of money, $495 million in that time's money. This movie is also led by Glenn Powell, who is just showing up in absolutely everything lately. He was just in Hitman that released on Netflix last week. I thought that was an incredible movie and he was great in it. Based on the trailers, the action actually looks incredible, and I feel like this movie is going to be a ton of fun, but sadly, it has a lot of competition in the time it's releasing, because as you can see here, the movie releases on July 19th, and 1 week later, Deadpool and Wolverine comes out, which we know is going to be probably absolutely huge. This movie also has an alarmingly high budget of $200 million. Now, if you adjust for inflation, the first movie actually had a very similar budget and was still a success. Times are very different than it was in 1996 for the movie theaters. People aren't just going to go and see any action movie, especially when there's a massive one coming out 1 week later. We also know that movies need to make at least 2 to 2.5 times their budget to actually be profitable because of all the marketing expenses, which means this movie would have to pull in upwards of $450 million, which only 3 movies so far this year have done. I really don't think it's going to happen, so sadly, because of those reasons, I think it's going to flop, even though I am personally really excited for it. Despicable Me 4 is coming out early July here, and it is set for a huge holiday weekend over July 4th. Listen, I'm sure one day the Minions mayhem is going to die down, but right now these things are an absolute cultural phenomenon. People love to go see the Minions. Like Minions The Rise of Gru that came out 2 years ago made over $900 million. The first Minions made $1.1 billion. Not to mention that Despicable Me 2 and 3 made right around $1 billion each respectively. Again, outside of Inside Out 2, which will already be out for 3 weeks by the time this thing comes out, there's almost no competition for this thing for kids movies at the theaters. And since everything else that's in theaters is literally some big budget action movie or R-rated horror film, this is just going to have absolutely no competition and make a ton of money. This is going to be a success and honestly probably one of the most successful movies of the year. Maxxxine starring Mia Goth is a horror movie coming out this year. It will be the third movie in the X trilogy, which includes films like X and Pearl. And if you're looking here, oh, these movies only made $15 million and $10 million. There's no way this is going to be a success. But yeah, look at that sentence above my head. These first two were made for absolutely nothing on $1 million budgets, and Maxxxine is actually no different. It also only has a $1 million budget. There's actually a likelihood if this movie makes like $15 million, it's actually going to be one of the most profitable movies of the year, making more than big budget things like Twisters. So I'm going to say a guaranteed success. There's just no way this movie makes under $5 million, and that would already be a success for the film. Beetlejuice is coming out at the end of the summer, over 30 years after the original. And sometimes that's a recipe for disaster, but this film is doing everything right. We're bringing back Tim Burton as a director, Michael Keaton is returning, Winona Ryder's returning into her role. Plus, we're adding some new age Hollywood stars here with Jenna Ortega joining the cast. I feel like this is going to be absolutely massive. The first film only made $74 million back in 1988, but if you account for inflation, that's actually over $200 million today, and this film has just gained such a cult following since its original theatrical release anyways. This is another one that's kind of difficult because we don't know what the budget is, but just assuming it's anything reasonable, I'm going to say this is actually going to be a success. Let's talk about my most anticipated movie of the summer, Deadpool and Wolverine. Now, obviously, we know it's R-rated, and yes, it is harder for R-rated movies to make a ton of money. This movie features two characters that have been in R-rated films that have already made a ton of movies, like Deadpool 1 and 2 both made over $780 million, and Logan made over $600 million. Well, yes, this movie is going to obviously be connected to both the X-Men movies and the MCU films. It kind of feels like it stands alone in this way that anybody that hasn't been keeping up can go and see this one, which hasn't been the case for a lot of the recent movies. This is also the only MCU movie releasing all this year. It's the first one since we got the Marvels last year. And I feel like Kevin Feige knows this is a possible make or break moment for the future of the MCU. If this movie is a success, it will be a huge sign for things to come in the future. They've been going so hard on the advertising ever since the Super Bowl, doing things like the different popcorn buckets and having Ryan Reynolds just have a bunch of different TV spots. I think this is going to be a perfect storm of just hype and nostalgia and everything, and hopefully a really good movie on its own, and this is going to be absolutely massive. I'm going to say guaranteed success.